And then within the 3 to 5 year range, again, continuing on the same way as reading to your child. And again, for speech development, we know that it is important, and for vocabulary, it's huge. And you can really have them do simple chores, and so the area of responsibility, respect and responsibility, they gauge, starting by giving them some simple chores. So even if they can just, take the clothes here and carry it over to, the lawn. There's always things, sometimes people can't think of it, but there's all kinds of little tasks that they can do at this age. And encouraging play with other children, and that's encouraging versus imposing it. And trying to model with sentences. Speech, because again, their speech is increasing and their sentences are getting longer, so they have more words that they're using and stringing along in sentences. So trying to help them with that by using complete sentences. Sometimes you see parents that they're still sort of talking like babies, we call it, so they're not really modeling very well for their child with language. And as we said with Bandura's model, it's this. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing is modeling appropriate behavior, because so often we don't think about it, and so we're actually modeling poor behavior. So I've seen people not even recognize this, because it's just sometimes could be so subtle, but even making up lies, in front of other people, even if it's little white lies, that, if you're calling in sick to work, and your child doesn't see you as sick, and you're, things like that, or you don't pick up the phone, you got to think how it might be interpreted on their end, that it's okay to do that, or, you can do that. So again, modeling appropriate behavior for the most part, and we're not perfect, we're not 100% consistent, but it's trying to do the best you can. There's one parent that I think of that he really has a difficult time in the social competence area, and he largely gets very frustrated with people and sometimes is very rude with people. And his child, frankly, can be very rude with people, and so he reprimands her for being rude and will tell her, but he doesn't recognize that he as an adult really does much of the same thing, and that's been modeled by her over and over and over and over again. So, and it's kind of a tough one because, to come out and tell him, but again, if we frame it that as far as modeling, but at some point in time he has to recognize that he needs to change his own behavior, that is impacting, because she sees that and she's really going to copy it and mimic it and think it's fine. And it is good to give a number of simple choices. It doesn't mean that everything's negotiable. And I've seen parents go the other extreme with this, where everything becomes a choice, whether they want to come in and eat becomes a choice, whether they want to get dressed for school becomes a choice, whether they want to go to the store becomes a choice, and I don't have a choice. We have to go to the grocery store, right? You got to take this child. It's not a choice. Okay? So again, making sure that parents are being, I think it's good to give them some simple choices and maybe what they want to wear, or if it's a choice between, broccoli and cauliflower, something to that extent. But you got to be careful when it becomes into the permissive quadrant, right, where it's, do you want to eat? Do you not want to eat? Do you not want to eat what's here? Do you want to go with me to the store? When it's, like I said, it's not negotiable. And assist with steps of problem solving. And sometimes that's hard for some of us to do. When we said that before, when we talked about discipline and punishment, and that, sometimes you have parents that just want to solve it for the child or give them the answer, and that's not the point of it. You want them to develop their own strategies and be able to step by step. And that way it feels good to them. They actually problem solved it, not the parent doing it for them. Okay. And one of the things that we'll likely be talking about in the future is parenting a child with a disability or medical condition, and looking at some things like what are some developmental screens and what kind of information do they provide. Because again, we already talked about the areas of development, but for children that have different medical conditions or developmentally delayed, you'll see a lot of variations as to the milestones, right? And parents of very young children will typically experience guilt, anxiety, and depression. So parents of children that have a disability or medical condition, okay, that's a huge area, is what's going on with that parent. Okay, so you had mentioned, the stressors and the different things they're dealing with, but there's also these elements. We'll see more elevated anxiety, depressive symptoms, okay, feelings of guilt, parents feeling that guilty of because somehow they caused this condition or something they did. And unfortunately, sometimes because of all of this, it ends up, if anything, hindering the progress of their child. So if they have so much guilt around it, they may be actually more permissive in many ways, when it comes to their child. They may have more difficulty setting limits and things. So just parenting. And mourning is a large piece, and we have a lot of losses. Just human beings experience a number of different losses, and the loss of a normal developing child, or that fantasy of having a normal developing child for a parent who has a child with a disability, particularly if it's going to be a pervasive one, lifelong. It's going to impact their dependence. They're independent, so they'll be dependent on somebody. Maybe won't be able to speak or won't be able to do certain things as a result. That we do see that many parents really need to almost go through that like a grieving process as they would, because of the loss, because it's so tied up in what they envision for themselves as being a parent of a normal developing child. And I have seen that, and Judith can definitely share with you a lot of the cases of our families. So these will be some things we'll take a look at. We'll talk also a little bit about, as far as discipline, so what would be different? Are there going to be differences when you're disciplining a child that has a disability or medical condition? And what's the impact on families as a whole? It's not just the parent-child dyad, it's really, you've got to consider the entire family. So the siblings. And I'm sure you guys have already picked up on some of this. When the sole focus is this particular child and that child's needs, and there's guilt around that, anxiety around that, depression around that, all these different things, but really it's the center, and it can become the center of the whole family. And unfortunately, some of the other siblings may not get attended to. There's things that go overlooked, right, or minimized. And what's the involvement, if there is involvement with the grandparents and parents, what's the impact there with those different generations? And are there any special resources that we need to consider for our parents, which I know you guys are already, you're getting to know that, right? So, okay. So why are these topics important for us to know about? Well, in essence, the whole idea is to make us more effective with our families, so you guys have more information and education in all these areas to make you more effective. Being able to provide that to our families and assist us as providers to recognize the stressors on a given family, which I'm sure you guys are doing very well at, being able to recognize the stressors and to work with them to try to alleviate what you're able to. But again, if some of those are more internalized, or how they're interpreting it, it's their own frame of, their mental framework, that's going to be more challenging for you guys. If their perception of their child is just very negative and there's a lot of depressive things, then we may need some other resources in there. Okay, so it's going to interfere with you being able to do anything, and probably other people as well. So the parents may need help beyond what we're just able to give them. Okay, well that is what I have today. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, and like I said, the child development part, this was more of a summary of the earlier training we had. So hopefully, you know, you found it helpful, and if you want the other training at some point, you know, I can schedule it out with Laura and we keep with that. Okay, so no questions. Well, good. I hope some of it was a lot of it new to you, or was it pretty much you guys have had this before?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's okay if you did have it before, actually. Sometimes it's always good to have refreshers of things, and sometimes when you have other people, you know, different people presented, there's just different elements. I've always found it helpful, even though, you know, I know a certain subject, if you go and listen to it again, you hear other things you didn't pick up on or remember about it, or things that weren't emphasized about it that you didn't know, that kind of thing. Okay, if you could fill out the evaluation form, I need to get 5 of those, and all of you signed, so that's great. And as a matter of fact, we have a training next week. With you guys, it's going to be infant mental health, and in the morning we're going to do abuse and prevention. But in the afternoon, just know that we're going to be talking about attachment and infant mental health. So we're going to go back to that. And that's a huge area in the field. The last 10 years, you know, there's been a lot of research on that, and people really looking at that now, more than ever. That's something important to know about.